Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. Tonight we got a great show for you, and we're going to be talking about this book here again. This is Astral Projection. We're going to be reading from this book, and it's going to explain all the good stuff that's in Astral Projection. I hope you enjoyed the last show, and maybe this one will be even better because we're diving into the book. And with that, I'm going to put up some pretty pictures because I know you like that. But I want to thank you all for coming tonight and enjoying the show. Oh, how that got it. Yeah. Anyway, never mind. But anyway, thanks for coming. And I appreciate each and one, everybody's time. And thank you for all your support. Makes this show much worthwhile because, hey, it's fun to do and share it with all of you. Anyway, we're going to get right into this. So here, let me present a picture so you don't have to look at my ugly mug all the time. And there we go. Cool beans. Okay, let's get into the Astral Projection. Let's pick up where we left off last time. Okay, and I think I put it right in here somewhere. Okay, we'll start a little bit before that. I got my little marker in here, and this is quite the good book, though, that's for sure. The term chakra originated in India yoga philosophy and refers to a particular energy zone in people. The lowest chakra is called the Muladhara and is associated with the essential instincts such as eating, fleeing, or the instinct to defend oneself. The next plane, the leva Swasthya, is linked to the sexual organs and sexual instinct. The third chakra is called Manipura, and it controls personal desires and one's ego. The fourth is called Anaharta and is associated with the feelings and empathy. Hudai is the name of the fifth chakra and is located in the throat and has to do with communication and intellect. The sixth, by the name of Anja, is also called the third eye. Some authors believe that it corresponds to the emphasis. And illustrations from yoga literature is located between the eye and the eyebrows and resembles an eye turned 90 degrees and also resembles the female sexual organ. Its function is that the enlightenment and understanding, and likewise the function of spiritual rebirth. The seventh and last plane is not a chakra according to some books, but reflects God himself, Shiva, who is also called by many the consciousness of God. When I perceived the disk of light rotating above my head, usually clearly during a sleep paralysis, I was convinced that this Shrahasya chakra is the one described by the Hindus in their ancient writings. The chakra is linked to out-of-body experiences, as Shrahasra is described in many texts as the portal through which the soul leaves the physical body and travels through higher spiritual dimensions. Passing through this chakra would also lead a spiritual enlightenment and would make it possible to enter a divine consciousness. I thought I'd try something as a teenager. When I was almost initiated, I could easily surpass characters like Jesus or Buddha. They were in their early 30s when they reached illumination. So I have the advantage of more than a decade. With growing enthusiasm, I put all my mental power into action to try to move my awareness to the disk of light rotating above me, something I later regretted. Everything went black and I woke up in my physical body along with a terrible headache. I had to run to the bathroom to throw up. My astral success came a couple weeks later when I fell into sleep paralysis. This time, the rotating disk of light was not present. The room was dark and silent, without any strange phenomenon or sound, light, or parallel dimensions. After the uncomfortable contact my head suffered with the disk of light, I changed the strategy. Now I wanted to proceed more carefully. Illumination had to wait. I wanted to move, not only not only physically during my sleep paralysis. In the books I had read about out of body experiences, sleep paralysis was described as a pre spiritual journey stage. If only I could move my shoulder in that state, I'd already be happy. So I focused on my right shoulder or my right arm and immediately remembered this bad feeling of not being able to move as my attempt failed miserably. Neither my physical arm nor my astral counterpart moved. I was about to give up when suddenly an intense vibration spread through my arm and after that throughout my entire body. It felt like a weak but clear electric current, sometimes unpleasant, sometimes not. The unpleasant thing was feeling that my nervous system would go into overdrive and that I would have to press myself against something hard. The pleasant sensation reminded me of a prolonged orgasm. I had to fight against it, not to hyperventilate. My heart was beating very hard. When I was finally able to discipline myself and relax, the pleasant feeling prevailed. My body lit up as if by a sharp electric light. My surroundings also became very bright, and I saw everything more clearly than in my usual waking state. Man, get up! I told myself silently, concentrating on not forcing my hand to move, but using my thought as a silent command. When my arm went up in the air, I screamed internally with happiness and was filled with a wave of joy and renewed hope. It was not until my physical it was not until my physical arm, the one was still lying on the bed. A totally different arm was now moving in the air, following to my will. It obeyed my wishes and moved back and forth. It resembled my physical arm, although it seemed to be made of another type of material, similar to light or electricity. What was happening was much more than just being able to move as an astral arm. It was experience of being in front of something great with fulfilled expectations and an uplifting feeling. Childhood fantasies mixed with the solemn feeling of experiencing great mysteries. The long years of studying spiritual subjects seemed to bear fruits at last. There was some truth to those theories. My childhood experiences became more real than ever before. For a long time, I had forgotten about them or stopped thinking too much about them. Now I had taken a decisive step to experience them again in a more mature and controlled way. Even if it was just a movement of my arm, up to that point, it was a decisive milestone that showed me that the next step was within my grasp. From that day forth, sleep paralysis would be a desirable state and not an unpleasant one. Every night, sleep paralysis didn't happen, made me unhappy. At most, I entered into sleep paralysis a couple of times a week, and almost every time I succeeded in raising my astral arm out of my physical body and was able to do it several times. I had improved, and now I could raise both arms at the same time outside of my body. Fascinated at the sight of seeing both ghostly arms passing through each other when they touched, it looked like a lighting flame. When I had my astral hands together, as if in prayer position, I could light them on fire using enormous force. It was as if created by a kind of connection, concentrated of energy. A couple of months after I managed to separate my astral arms from my physical body, I was able to lift not only my arms, but also my legs. I put me in a strange position with arms and legs raised. I laughed at myself, but tried to take the next step. My hips rose from the bed, and soon so did my entire body, just up to my head, which didn't want to let go of my body at all. I was astrally standing on my head, so to speak, finding the scene quite funny, although it did not feel weird, or it did feel weird that the head was held so tightly. I began to rotate involuntarily, as if my body were some kind of propeller. It started off really slow and felt great, almost like I was riding a carousel, but it started to go faster, increasing in speed until I started running across the room in a colossal way. Only my head remained firm to my body, like a tip of a top. There was a noise, as if the something on the end tore off with a metallic sound. Then an invisible force pulled me obliquely backwards and upwards. It was it it was if he was on roller coaster going in the opposite direction. This feeling of freedom cannot be put in words. I felt like a butterfly that slipped out of its cocoon, took flight for the first time on its wings. Floating, I watched from above how my physical body slept, lying on its back. I had left my body. For me, it was clear that this was the beginning of an adventure like no other. The cup of coffee vibrated as I tried to take control of the situation. I knew my out of body experiences, but not in everyday situations. What would happen if I left my body now? In the cafe, in the middle of a conversation with a good friend. The thought filled me with fear. Never before had such an experience happened without my consciously trying to bring them about. But I couldn't resist the temptation of taking an astral walk through the city near Stockholm, because now I knew what was going on and recognized that this was neither a case of insanity nor a drug in my coffee. I was able to begin to influence the course of action. I had the choice of to interrupt this astral experience or go along with it. While my friend still hadn't finished his sentence, I let my consciousness move to another temporal dimension, different from that of the physical body, the dimension in which I was drinking coffee. It was worth trying to find out, for my continued studies, what would happen if I tried to take a short astral walk under these unexpected conditions. I concentrated them and tried to raise my non physical body. The light flickered around me, its intensely increasing as I rose step by step. My physical body, still holding the coffee cup, stayed on the table. I floated under the ceiling above and the other customers at the cafe. As far as I could see, I was the only one outside of my body. After my astral travel could pass through physical objects without problems, I made an effort not to go out through the door, but simply flew through the wall towards the street. I landed on the Savagagrin, where which was busier than usual, where cars and people often rushed past, fast and hectic. Now, however, the cars and the pedestrians passed by as if in slow motion, and the sound of the car engines penetrated me like a muffled, barely audible gargle. I had never seen the Savagagrin like this before. I floated back and forth and watched the buildings and the people. I never had this kind of out of body experience before and was fascinated at the same time, feeling a bit uneasy that it happened without me intending it to happen in the middle of the day in the middle of the city. Suddenly, something moved at a frenetic speed near me. It was a small point of light crossing between people and cars. Something Sometimes it would plunge directly into the person, causing a small beam of light. From a perspective of the point of light, people and cars must have been moving at an even slower speed than I perceived them. The dot was flying so fast that I even had difficulty following it, and my astral gaze, which was normally in a position to perceive everything that my physical eyes could never register. Suddenly, the point of light stopped, perhaps 50 meters away from me, and seemed to turn to look at me. I felt a chill down my back. This thing seemed to have a consciousness of its own, and I had the feeling that it was totally in its element. I had the impression of perceiving a very frequent buzzing coming from him. For a second, I thought it had wings, but before I could look well, the point of light flashed away and disappeared. Up until that time, I had felt that I had a special gift, as if I floated between cars and people. But after seeing the point of light, I felt like a clumsy child who had just learned to swim and was struggling in an element unknown to him. Being more attentive, I kept floating down the street, just as I could see people in my astral state, who on the contrary could not notice me. The point of light gave me the strong feeling that there was something that could observe me and that I could not see. From the side, suddenly a kind of hole or tunnel grew outwards, and I lost control of myself as I was being pulled towards it. I moved my arms and legs very fast, as if I was falling down the tunnel and skidding in circles, and I didn't know where was up or down. The tunnel was a golden in color, and I wondered what was wrong with me as that moment. At that moment, was this the tunnel I had heard about that people came to during near-death experiences? Would I see the end of the tunnel, that that figure of light that receives with open arms? Well, we'll find out, won't we? Those who traveled through the tunnel I had read descriptions of, such as a figure from some Christians interpreted as Jesus, others as their personal guardian angel, and still others said to be a deceased friend or family member who greets them from the other side as uh, a redeemer. Some brain researchers dismiss the tunnel experience as a trick played by the brain when it lacks oxygen. Some researchers, on the other hand, believe that this experience is too complex and significant to dismiss. Whatever it implied, I didn't want this figure to come up. At least, if that meant I end up on the other side forever. I enjoyed my astral experience, but it was still too young, and I really liked the physical world to simply want to die. If I had really found myself in this final tunnel, I would have feared for my life, or should I have felt relieved, as many dying people say, but I didn't feel anything like that, just discomfort and confusion. The tunnel also looked too concrete and close to the ground to even be the one that existed on the farthest frontiers of life. And if the tunnel had a color as horrible as this one I was traveling in, then I felt sorry for those who were there on their last journey. It was the typical color found in many Stockholm metro stations, a slightly shiny but dirty gold. When I finally burst out of the tunnel over bigger Jarham, uh, Jar, whatever, I realized that I hadn't traveled through the last tunnel, but through a long road tunnel that runs through the mountain between Sagavan and Berger Jargatan. How relieved I was. Along the floating Bridger Jargatan, I began to think about the secluded tunnel and the experience of death. Death is the furthest frontier of life, and almost all that fears that man in his life can be attributed to the fear of death. At the same time, men of all times have been fascinated by the fact of perishing, and we seem to have an addition to the fear of death. A drive towards it, since we are interested in taking a look at the most distant frontier. Everyone from adventurers to religious mystics have tried to subdue their fear of dying, and sometimes even death itself. A religion that doesn't focus so heavily on the end of life is hard to find. The promise of a kingdom of heaven, salvation, the wonderful paradise, or the state of nirvana were always ideas that religions use to give themselves meaning. Religions promise to use the path that the one way or another can defeat death. I was wondering if men of all times already knew the fear of death, or if it was just a symptom of having lost contact with our soul. At the same time, I held the view that the other side was not just a kingdom of heaven, but an equally wide spectrum, full of good and bad experiences, just like the physical world. Perhaps men have clearly, or very consciously, rationalized the soul because it made life something more impressive, but also something more demanding and complex. I started to reflect on the fact of reincarnation. In the books and articles I had read about astral travel and out of body experiences, it seemed as if reincarnation was an assumed idea. I doubt having read a single text that does not touch on the subject of rebirth or life after death. I also have the feeling that life happens in cycles, like everything else in nature, and that one returns to earthly life one way or another. At the same time, the accounts of ancient incarnations are more self glorifying than sensible. There we go. Those who reported on their past lives were almost always great kings or queens, important thinkers or scientists. Napoleon, Caesar, Cleopatra, Da Vinci, or also a successful architect who left a legacy of magnificent moments. I've never heard anyone say that she was a single mother on Sar Hoffman, who died of lung cancer from heavy smoking, or a confused drug addict who overdosed, poor and forgotten, in a cheap lodging. Don't exhausted health workers, street workers who died in accidents at work, or simply retirees also reincarnate? That each and every one of them has been Napoleon in the past life seems unconvincing to me. A loud horn startled me from my reflections. With horror, I verified that cars and people were moving in normal speed again. My astral body had returned to the normal time stream, and all the noises and movements were in real time again. A red Porsche honked its horn angrily at another car in its path, and the driver in the expensive suit was cursing behind the wheel. I could see his aurora. It was red like his car. The aurora in the area of the light that surrounds a person, and the one can tell a person's mood from it. In the case of the Porsche driver, it was very clear that the red color of his aurora had to do with his anger. I continued my way in the direction of Stuarpan until the Bridger Jarham intersection with the Hagatan. I continued my astral walk towards the Hagatan. I used to do this kind of city walk before a couple of times a week. It actually quite boring a route, but for some reason, speeding this way through the most central part of Stockholm, full of intersecting streets at the right angles, became a quirky little tradition. That was indeed the reason why, even now in my astral form, I was traveling more or less the same route, with the difference that this time I had inadvertently took a shortcut through the Tunnelgagen or the way to Hamagatten. I stopped in front of the NK shopping mall. The place was packed with people, as usual. Almost everyone had sunglasses on, even though it wasn't particularly sunny. A kind of smoke or fog was pouring out from the mall, and it then hit me like a punch to the face. It was the smell of perfume section. It was able to recognize flower and herbal essences because of the time to time I mixed the essences that I had bought from the essence factories on the Wallingham for my own incense. But in my astral state, most senses seemed unbearably chemical and synthetic to me, and seemed unbelievably mixed with a surprisingly large number of hardly unidentified odors. I remembered the rumor that some well known perfumes mixed urine from tortured cats in their extracts. I was really hoping it was just fake sort of story. The glass pillar at the Sangatory stood before me like a modern monument of phallus, covered with stains of smog and dirt. When I arrived at this place, I had a strange feeling. Along the Kirketset Siglartor represents a time of utopia visions of the perfect great city. But today, Slagator is known for its drug addicts and its desolate and gloomy atmosphere. From the corner of the market, which was in front of the subway station, I could see a mist which did not look at all like the one that mantled from the MK shopping center. The fog here was made up of drugged body, sweat, and drug vapors, bodily or bloody hypodermic needles, and a heavy dark dispository mix with synthetically induced happiness. Resonance artists Hieronymus botches and depictions of hell closely resembled this image. I felt discouraged in a way that not easy for me to deal with, as if I were in my physical body. It was hard to just tune out the suppress my surroundings while in my astral body. I was reminded of an article at once which recognized Sweden as one of the few countries in Europe where addicts are seen as a case for the police, while in the rest of Europe, medical care is responsible for it. I quickly left Sirgatorg down Savagan, where my astral walk had started. I flew back to the cafe, this time through the doors, and saw my body and my friends sitting at the table. My acquaintance looked as if he had kept telling his story only in a couple of sentences. I then shook myself and felt as if my astral body and my physical body were one again. Ooh, it's getting interesting, guys. Or what do you think about this? My friend, a law student, asked. I looked into the coffee cup, nodded while acting self-absorbed, and mumbled, "Could you be more specific, please?" So there you go. He's playing dumb. He's having fun with his astral body, zipping around the universe. So we're going to end right there, and that is that chapter. Next chapter will be the idea of the soul according to the ancient doctrines. Wow, this is a pretty interesting trip. Have you astral traveled? Have you astral traveled? Do you want to astral travel? Well, this is an interesting story about somebody who's astral traveled, and he's going to tell you all about it. And we're reading it. It's going to be good. So this is part 2. There will be a part 3 coming up soon. So I hope you join me on that day, and we'll do that too. Anyway, thank you all for coming. It's been a great time, and I hope you go out and do something. Try this astral travel stuff. Let me know in the comments below if it works for you. Have you ever had sleep paralysis? Maybe you were astral traveling and you didn't even know it. Well, I'm going to get busy with it and start learning myself. So anyway, with that, go out, do something nice for somebody. Makes you feel good. Trust me, it really does. With that, remember everybody, be the frequency you want to receive.